Palace Hotel, Episode 3. Yongdao surveyed the Japanese military base in Hong Kong. Yongdao heard that the newly appointed principal, Huang was originally the commander of the Guangdong Air Force and the Chen Jitang's faction, and had just come to the Central Aviation School as principal. Not long ago, the Guangdong and Guangxi incidents occurred, and an armed coup was avoided thanks to Commander Huang leading Guangdong Air Force planes and pilots to defect to Central Air Force. He wondered, what was the situation with Principal Huang calling a meeting at this time? He put away the letter and hurried to the meeting room. When he arrived, he found that the other instructors had already arrived before him. The secretary, who was taking notes, told Principal Huang that all the instructors had arrived. Principal Huang stood up, with deep and powerful voice said, "Intelligence from all sides indicates that the danger of a large-scale war between China and Japan is imminent. Today, I urgently summon you all to formulate a targeted training plan and clarify the training focus of the bombing group. The Japanese military barracks stationed in Hongkou and the Yangshupu areas of Shanghai, the headquarters of the Japanese Special Naval Landing Force, and the Japanese cruisers, destroyers, and aircraft carriers patrolling the Huangpu River and the Yangtze River estuary." After a pause, he swept his fiery gaze across the instructors present and said, "Bombing training will be divided into two categories. First, simulating Japanese warships by drawing their outlines along the Qiantang River using the White Pounder. Second, sending our school bombing group, flight instructors, and senior students dressed in civilian clothes to infiltrate Shanghai by train to identify Japanese targets." After another pause, he looked at the young instructors with a gentle gaze. Then, in a low, firm tone, he asked, "Which instructor speaks Shanghainese?" Yongdao replied, "Reporting to Principal Huang, I do. I grew up in Shanghai and am familiar with the terrain. Please send me." Principal Huang smiled slightly and said, "All right. Select 2 trainees whose origin is Guangdong, preferably also familiar with Shanghai. Once the Aviation Commission approves the new training plan, we will execute it immediately." Yongdao had just returned from visiting relatives in Shanghai, but unexpectedly, he had another opportunity to go. However, this time he was going on a mission. He wondered, "I wonder if I can see Bao Hui in Shanghai." That evening, he returned to his dormitory exhausted, thinking about his mission in Shanghai. He had no time and energy to fight Lin Haoen. The sudden mission had occupied his attention, and his anger towards Lin Haoen had subsided. Now, he needed to calm down. He took a cold shower to cool himself down, to cool his feverish mind, and pondered strategies for dealing with his rival Lin Haoen, as well as how to complete his mission in Shanghai. He lay in bed, thinking that not long after the creation of mankind, the first war broke out. A civil war, a family war. Cain, the elder brother, killed his brother Abel, simply because Abel's actions were evil and Abel's were good. Afterwards, the earth was filled with the clash of swords, with people killing one another and different peoples slaughtering each other. The brutal wars led people to pray for peace and sign covenants. But often, before the ink was dry on these covenants, war would break out again, and the sounds of killing would fill the air. This cycle repeated itself endlessly, to this day without ceasing. Having thoroughly studied war history and the Bible, he knew clearly that there is no lasting peace on war. So-called peace is merely a pause between two wars. The human history he saw began with the history of Adam and Eve's breach of covenant. Humanity's breach of covenant began with the first couple, Adam and Eve, who broke God's covenant by eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which the covenant forbade them to eat. Neither Adam nor Eve confessed their sins, each shifting blame and trying to clarify their own actions. Human history is a history of war and also a recurring history of breach of covenant. Earthly beings cannot foresee tomorrow's events. Being of the flesh, they can only see what is before them, not the truth behind it. People, nations, and events all interact and change in a dynamic process. The world is like a complex reactor where a single spark can trigger a chain reaction. Those who dream of controlling the world with a self-centered mindset, no matter how powerful they may be for a time, will ultimately perish. An unseen, eternal force protects the universe, delivering just judgments at the perfect time. After abandoning his studies to join the army, he knew what he would face. For 25 years of the Republic of China, internal strife had never ceased, and external enemies were relentless. Japan, across the sea, had risen to the ranks of the great powers after the Meiji Restoration, and after the Treaty of Shimonoseki, it coveted China even more. 5 years ago, the Japanese Guangdong army, taking advantage of the September 18 incident, controlled the 3 northeastern provinces, establishing the Manchukuo under its control, indirectly triggering the treaty, the entry of Western powers into the global arena. Japan intended to control China, a landmass 25 times the size of Japanese archipelago, to contend with the Western powers. Last year, the Japanese garrison controlled North China. The Japanese soldiers, chanting Sino-Japanese friendship songs and carrying swords and guns, went everywhere they went, killing everywhere they went. The Chinese in North and Northeast China had already witnessed the Japanese army's friendly quotation mark approach, with guns and cannons. Japan wanted to control China's politics and economy before China became powerful. In order to seize resources and provide economic and political guarantees for its defeat of the Western powers. Battlefield and love. Two battles coincidentally erupted together, he thought. The Aviation Commission approved the bombing training plan. The school sent Yongdao with 2 senior students to Shanghai to observe Japanese targets. Yongdao carefully selected 2 quick-witted, observant, and familiar with Shanghai's situation Guangdong students Huang and Lin Haoen to scout Hongkou. Hongkou had many Cantonese-speaking people. Yongdao, dressed in a dark gray silk robe, disguised himself as a silk merchant coming to Shanghai to do business. The 2 students, disguised as shop assistants, carried silk fabric samples. The 3 of them set off from Jianqiao Station in the early morning and arrived at Shanghai North Station in the evening. As soon as they exited the station, they saw the light green traveler taxi from Shanghai Xiangsheng car rental, which they had booked in advance, parked by the roadside. The 3 of them got in and headed straight for the inconspicuous Kexiang Hotel on Jiangwan Road, not far from the headquarters of the Japanese Special Navy Landing Force. As Yongdao and the 2 students drove through the streets of Shanghai, night was falling. The streetlights were just coming on, and the neon lights of the shops flicked on and off. American cars roared past, and the French cafes, Japanese restaurants, German pharmacies, British shoe stores, Jewish synagogues, Christian churches, dance halls, villas, Japanese-style wooden houses, and Chinese-style attics lined both sides of the road. Looking at the prosperity before him, Yongdao, who was not yet 30 years old, found it hard to imagine that more than 90 years ago, when Shanghai had just opened as a treaty port, the Hongkou area consisted of only a few quiet towns, and the large areas were still rural fishing villages, wastelands, and graveyards. 2 years after the port opened, to facilitate the settlement of British residents and to separate the Chinese and the foreign nationals for better security, the British consul and the Shanghai Daotai local official agreed on the Shanghai land lease regulations, allocating wasteland along the Huang River to British residents, gradually forming the British concession. After a few years later, the land was allocated to American residents, becoming the American concession. The British and American concessions merged, gradually evolving into the international settlement controlled by the powers, including Japan. Later, France also acquired the land, becoming the French concession. In 1907, when Yongdao was born, the wasteland and the small towns previously leased to the powers had, after more than half a century of development, transformed into Shanghai's concessions, resembling states within a state. Various foreign powers, driven by their own needs, introduced modern innovations to the concessions and Shanghai, including China's first electric light, first telephone, first newspaper, first magazine, first bookstore, first grand hotel, first cinema, first football stadium, first fire station, first modern university, and the first sewage treatment plant. Years ago, Sun Yat-sen, the founder of the Republic of China, proposed the Greater Shanghai Plan, aiming to meticulously vitalize this young city, particularly by breaking the dominance of the international settlement and the French concession in the city center. However, since the establishment of the Republic of China, years of war have forced the Greater Shanghai Plan to be shelved. Yongdao, who grew up in Shanghai, witnessed firsthand how Shanghai attracted expatriates from both the old and the new worlds like a magnet, with the greatest attraction being its neighbor, Japan. He felt that Shanghai was like a beautiful young woman in her prime, attracting the attention of various powerful figures. They seemed to be kindly spending money to adorn this woman, but when she blossomed into a captivating figure, one of the powerful figures couldn't wait to break down the door and claim her for himself. The powerful figure was Japan. He also remembered that 5 years earlier, during the September 18 incident in northeast China, Western powers, under the pretext of protecting their expatriates, sent troops to occupy the Shanghai concessions. Japan seized the opportunity to control the area north and east of the international settlement, extending to the west area of North Sichuan Road, Hongkou. The area they were going to survey was Shanghai's prime location, a place of great fortune. More than 40 years ago, after the Sino-Japanese War of 1894 to 1895, the Japanese Navy was stationed here. The Japanese warships cruised the Huangpu River as if it were their own home. 4 years ago, after the January 28th incident, Japan obtained special privileges through the Shanghai Armistice Agreement, allowing its troops to temporarily reside in the northern and eastern districts of the international settlement, as well as the adjacent road-building area. Japanese Navy Marines replaced Japanese police officers in an armed patrols on the streets. Last year, a new 4-story reinforced concrete headquarters of the Japanese Special Navy Landing Force, resembling an aircraft carrier, was built at the intersection of North Sichuan Road and Jiangwan Road. Before coming to Shanghai, Yongdao and his 2 students carefully studied military maps of Shanghai, especially the Hong Kong area, marking the main Japanese military facilities and the Japanese settlements in Shanghai on the maps. That's all for today. Thank you for listening and watching.